Good afternoon. It's the 13th of August 2020 and my name is Steve Wiggins. I'm an agricultural economist working at the Overseas Development Institute in London, and I'm a member of the consortium which is Agricultural Policy Research for Africa, or APRA. And this short video log reports some early impressions from the early findings that are coming out of longitudinal studies looking at the stories of cocoa growers in Ghana, cocoa growers in Nigeria, rice farmers on the Fogera plain in Tanzania, sunflower farmers in Singida in Tanzania, groundnut growers in Malawi, and maize and tobacco growers in Mvurwe district of Zimbabwe. Now, back in 2014, we wrote a paper about the studies we were carrying out on smallholder commercialization in Africa at the time, and it had a subtitle of Cautious Commercialization. If we had a subtitle to the current set of studies, it would be about partial commercialization. So what are we seeing? We're seeing that farmers are turning over more of their land, planting them up to crops for sale. And they're doing so because they can realize higher returns from those cash crops than they could from most of their food crops. But they're only doing this partially. Yes, many of them are using improved seeds and varieties. They're using some fertilizer. They're deploying crop protection chemicals against pest diseases. They're sometimes using herbicides against weeds. And in some cases, farmers have bought themselves an irrigation pump and are now watering their crops. But they do these things to a limited extent and degree. They are not optimizing the use of these inputs. They are not intensifying to the degree that they possibly could. When ministries of agriculture, research centres, NGOs, commercial input suppliers run trial and demonstration plots, they usually achieve 2 times the yields that we're seeing from the farmers that we study. Now, why is this? Well, at the margin, of course, those trial and demonstration plots flatter the researchers. They tend to over-apply the inputs, they tend to use copious amounts of labour, they take all kinds of pains to get the best possible results to make the plots look as good as possible. And you can always do that on a quarter hectare plot if you have the resources. So it's not entirely a fair comparison, but that only explains a small part of the difference. The real story is one about access to capital. Put simply, most of the smallholders that we've interviewed, that we've surveyed, that we've talked to, are short of capital, and they're critically short of capital in the growing season. They don't have enough money to buy the inputs, to pay for the labour, to get the services they need, to get full value from their fields. Now, why is that? The amounts of money that they probably need through a growing season for many of the crops that we're talking about is not very large. It's $100 to $200. And these days in an African village, that is not that large an amount of money. But there are competing demands for that money. Other things that take priority. That includes everyday living expenses. And how often is it reported that farmers have said, in the old days, we hardly needed money. We produced most of the things that we consumed on the farm from our own efforts. But today, everything costs money. It's also about the school bills. It's also about medical fees. These take priorities. All must be sacrificed in many African villages to making sure that teenage sons and daughters get through secondary school, and very understandably so. All must be sacrificed to making sure that people who have fallen sick or had an accident get to see a doctor, get to buy the drugs they need, or to attend the hospital that they need to visit. Now, it's not that all households achieve the ideal of paying those bills. An unfortunate group of farmers, and in some places it may even be the majority of people, fall short of those ideals. The point is, those are now the ideals, and the insufficiency, the inability to pay those bills is what marks out poverty in rural Africa today. It's the inability to afford a decent life. So given all of those demands, the $100, the $200 for the farm inputs, for the labour and so on, cannot be afforded. Moreover, there is always the worry for the farmer, what happens if my crop fails? I can't pay back the inputs. What happens if the prices in the market fall below the expected level? I can't pay back my inputs. The struggle is thus about capital. Some households, of course, have a few more resources than others, a few more advantages in life. Some have an income source, some have a dependable income source. Step forward Mwalimu, the village school teacher. They indeed can make full use of their plots. They indeed can get the full benefit from commercialization. They can accumulate capital. They can invest in a bigger farm. They can buy a village store. Perhaps they can even consider paying a fare to Europe for their son or daughter who is a would-be migrant. Much the same problem of capital applies throughout the supply chain. In the Rural Service Centre, there's an oil pressing mill. It's a boon to farmers. It wasn't there 5 years ago. But the oil pressing mill has an old battered machine and it only gets 2/3 of the oil from the oil seeds that a modern processing machine could. The owner knows this. The owner would like to upgrade. But where are the $1,000, the $2,000, the $5,000 to re-equip the mill and make it technically efficient? So throughout the supply chain, from the farm through the enterprises and the supply chain through to the cities, there are farms and businesses that are operating to only part of their full potential, and they're stymied by lack of capital. They would love to be able to invest more. They would love to be able to get the full value from the enterprises to which they have dedicated themselves. They would love, as a result, to be able to live a decent life that perhaps is $1,000, $2,000 more earned every year. This is a different rural Africa to that was described in the 1980s, where observers, perhaps rather exaggeratedly, saw so many African rural households as engaged in simply a struggle to eat, a struggle to survive. That was always an exaggeration, but things are very much changed today in 2020. For most families, the struggle to eat is not the main struggle. But they still lead hard lives, where shocks can be very difficult to handle, and where bad luck, an illness, an accident, an addiction can put the whole household on the road to ruin. Social protection is part of our story as well. Thank you.